They're like, oh, move to Colorado, and I did for like a year, and I was like, I hate it here.
We didn't like Colorado. I was born in Colorado, but I like to visit, but I couldn't live there. I would get so crazy.
My brother still lives there for whatever reason he decides to stay in Colorado, but it was just too cold. And like it was just, they don't plow the streets really well, and like on the days, I only died like 4 times. I was like, you guys can't plow up here? Come on.
Right. Well, when I don't know if you, how old were you when you were there?
24.
Oh, okay. So all the cadets, well, I don't know what they drive now, but back in the day, when you got to be a first classman, you were allowed to have a car,
Mm-hmm.
and they all all the classes had a car committee that negotiated with some bank to give us a good consideration, blah blah blah. And in the late '60s, everybody bought a vet.
Bought what?
A vet. But as things got more expensive, people started buying Trans Ams and 240Zs. Okay. And the Trans Am was my kind of class car. Everybody bought one. But I bought a Ford F-150 4-wheel drive pickup truck. So the snow didn't bother me one whit.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know how they move around in those vehicles in the wintertime. But I don't know.
When I was a junior, second classman, I got along pretty good with the firsties, and so I could get a car when I needed it. And Dave Garten used to lend me his '75 Vet. It was white. It was a beautiful car. And it had an L86. Had a nice engine in it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a big parking lot right off of Academy down the way, just a little bit. Big parking lot. So when we had a little snow on the ground, I would take Dave's vet out in that parking lot and go, if you do this in a Corvette, on an automatic transmission Corvette like this,
Mm-hmm.
the car goes, because the torque of the engine, and the wheels. And I would I'm thinking.
I'm sure he loved that.
Well, he didn't know.
Well, obviously. He wouldn't let you take his car otherwise.
Anyway, fun times. The foolishness of youth.
Can I ask a question about the syllabus?
Sure.
So, at least on the syllabus that I printed out, which was earlier in the year, I think the next class period, there's only one more on the 21st. So we're not meeting again until then?
Is that really? Really? There's only one more class?
We have one more class after this class. Isn't that crazy? That's one good thing about the Saturday seminar is you get through of a whole law school class in basically 6 classes. I love it and I hate it. Like students always like it because you're done, and hopefully you enjoyed the time that we have class went by faster than you probably expected it to. But yeah, we're gonna skip to obligation to obey the law materials, and we're gonna do justice on the last time. So we'll do the Giamato justice next, and then the fifth justice next time. Good morning.
So we're skipping the obligation to obey the law?
Yeah, because we can use that all along, that's.
Who needs it?
Who needs that? Obligations?
Do we really feel an obligation after this class? When we stop at a deserted intersection in the middle of the night.
Did you see that interview with Justice Kennedy
No.
about? It was very interesting, very on point for this class.
The realism material.
Well, right, because he's talking about Kim Davis,
Oh.
and basically it was almost surreal, and I'm not sure I don't know.
In what way?
Well, here's what he said. He said, during the Nazi regime, only 3 judges resigned rather than enforce the laws of the Third Reich.
Yeah.
Now, I'm trying to get this metaphor in my head. So he's comparing Kim Davis to a judge under the Third Reich. I'm going, well, so she should have resigned. But if you're saying that she should have resigned, what you're saying is you guys are Nazis. And
Well,
I can't, I think,
don't like his analogy, because it's hard to say, you know, like, Nazi application of the law is really pretty,
yeah, we're so far out there that,
yeah.
you know, of course, sometimes an extreme analogy helps to
Yeah,
clarify.
it does, yeah.
But
completely,
then I thought, wait a second, what's the higher duty when you're confronted with evil? Is it to run away from it, or is it to fight it? Is resigning running away? Is staying fighting? And, of course, anyway,
especially when you're an official, you
Right,
know,
yeah.
or even a police officer,
Right.
or,
well, there,
yeah.
in the, you know, in the context of enforcing a law that many people don't think is a law, or should be a law, or what is a law? There was an article a month ago after the latest nut job at a school killed people. They said, you know, because the president was saying Australia and England have reasonable gun laws, which is to say they confiscate guns. And he was saying we ought to do that here, so that kind of the mask is off. They're not about reasonable gun laws; they want to confiscate guns. And a bunch of people were going, well, how would that work practically? Practically, how many police officers will come to somebody's home in Texas and say, "Give me your gun"? And the answer is very few. Few police officers would do that. I would think. And so it's kind of one of those, if you push too hard, it breaks.
Yeah, right, yeah, completely, yeah. That's a big hit, right?
Oh yeah,
Hypothetical.
I don't think that's ever.
Yeah,
I don't think that's ever gonna happen.
I don't know.
But part of the reason it's never going to happen is that, you know, it's just one of those people don't think that's right. Most, you know, a big mass of people, and if you push too hard, it breaks.
But the Kim Davis thing versus the Nazi thing is like, the Nazi thing was excluding segments of society, literally, and the law on gay marriage is more inclusive in society.
Well, you know, it sounds inclusive, except that no homosexual in the last 30 years has had the force of law punish them for some, you know, but in the in the last year we've had numerous Christians fined and you know, hey, bake a cake for this wedding. You will bake the cake. We'll bake them a happy day cake. We just don't want to bake them a happy wedding cake. Well, here's your cake.
Has there been fines?
Oh yeah, massive fines. Two people have lost their businesses. Yeah, I mean it's.
We can start circulating the roll. Yeah. Okay, and if anybody comes in, make sure they get their roll. How's everyone doing? I have to credit everybody here. Like, that takes a lot of dedication to come to law school on an awful, yucky, rainy day and on Halloween.
Halloween.
Yeah.
I think it's harder to come on the nice day.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's a good
Right through.
perspective. Yeah. I don't know. Are there any big football games on today?
We play OSU. So
Yeah, I
that'll be
know.
exciting,
That's gonna
but
be. Oh, and they're not gonna do the rectum check thing out of respect. I heard.
Thank you.
we're also not going to score any touchdowns out of respect either, I guess.
Good one.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, also credit to the back row who stepped up last week in Bill's absence. It was nice to hear from y'all. Yeah. Oh boy. Okay, so today we have a semi-ambitious agenda. I think everybody's probably starting to get tired, right? Just with school kicking in and classes and papers and balancing doing papers. If just talk about you, Jessica, being, stepping up in Bill's absence last week. Okay, so we'll cover a few administrative items, then we will, cover, Dworkin, which I'll be interested in your feedback on your impression of whether you think he is positive law / formalist, or if he's natural law, so he's kind of a hybrid, right? One book has him in the chapter under positivism, another book has him under the chapter of natural law, so it'll be interesting to hear what y'all think about that. And then we'll talk about realism, and I really love the realism materials, and I apologize for not giving y'all questions. It was a crazy week. I ended up having to drive to Charleston, straight through, that was 19 hours. And then last night, flying back, my Austin flight was canceled because of all the rain in Austin and tornadoes. So we finally ended up in Dallas at midnight, but had to rent a car and drive back home so I could get all my stuff through all the torrential rain and back again this morning. So my Halloween costume is zombie. Your job is to keep me alert today. Yeah. But the realism materials are fun, and we'll be looking up stuff on Wikipedia in our discussion, because normally I would have wanted to give y'all some Wikipedia stuff that's real interesting. You'll like it. But since y'all have laptops for the most part, we'll do it live. So, any questions before we get started? We'll try to finish working this morning, and we'll do realism this afternoon. Okay, so, administrative. One class left. Can y'all believe that? That's so crazy. Time goes by so fast. I'm always sad, and students are usually pretty happy about that. But I wish we had more time to cover more material and go more in depth. And I hope y'all have enjoyed it. So. Okay, but we don't meet again for 3 more weeks. So hopefully that's good time y'all can spend working on your papers, maybe outlining your other substantive classes that y'all need to start focusing on that way too. And, the reading for next time, just while y'all are all here, we're going to do the justice materials. We're going to skip the obligation to obey the law materials, because we've kind of already covered that in it. We've infused it. So, but we will do the D'Amato justice and the fixed justice. And we'll start with D'Amato, and I'll send questions to y'all. But you'll love the D'Amato justice materials. It's fascinating. And the fixed justice materials are also very, very, very interesting. That is an actual application of jurisprudence, separate from just studying the different schools. It's more of how it works in action. So hopefully you'll like that. So I think for the last class, that's a really good way to end the semester. So, rough draft, I will send a sample paper, and I'll do it this week early, so y'all have an idea of what your final product, what the class expectation is. And hopefully you've already read enough law review articles where you have a general sense. And then I don't know if y'all remember the layout that we did in class. But for your rough draft, I usually look for 7 to 10 pages of actual writing. It doesn't have to be sequential, and everybody writes differently. So you'll probably work in different sections of your paper, not necessarily in order. But it is a good idea to start framing your argument where it flows to your ultimate conclusion. But I always wrote my intro last. But I had a general idea of how I wanted to start my paper and how I wanted to end my paper, and then it was just filling in. So don't worry if your rough draft is rough. I mean, offered in Word in a rough draft. It's just starting to get stuff down on paper. It's okay to cut and paste block quotes for now. Eventually you'll want to reword it to where you don't have too much cutting and pasting. Good morning. Yes. And, but it doesn't have to be a fully footnoted, organized, grammatically correct. Just spew forth whatever is in your mind and running around. Get it down on paper. The more complete your rough draft is, the better feedback I can give you. So that's the only, I guess, caution is I'm able to give better feedback when your paper is a little more evolved. But don't panic if it isn't. So, and your final grade, the rough draft is a component of your final grade, but it's not the big exciting thing. So, I do want to see more than just an outline. I want to see some writing and footnoting if you can. If you don't have your footnotes in place, don't panic about that, but just do your best. Because then that'll help me help you. Questions on rough draft? Now, the due date on that is Sunday, next Sunday. So y'all, I'm considering extending that to Wednesday. Is that good for y'all? Okay, what day is that?
The 11th.
Okay, let's extend it to Wednesday, the 11th. And that'll give y'all some extra time, because I know that's a lot of work. And if anybody runs into a problem, it's a rough draft, just send what you have. And if you are still working on your rough draft, send what you have and then send me an updated version, because it'll take me probably a week and a half to turn those around and get them back to y'all. What I'll do is scan them with my comments and just email you separately, my comments on your draft. So pretty much from this point of the semester on, it's one-on-one work with y'all by email. So definitely don't hesitate to contact me, call me, email me, whatever. I usually do just one full rough draft review, and then after the rough drafts are turned in, then on time permitting, I'll help you if you want to send me updated drafts, but it's not the full-blown, all-encompassing review that I do on the first rough draft. But if I haven't gotten to your rough draft yet, and you're still working with it over the next several days after the due date, send me your most complete version, and I can generally edit that fully. But do try to meet the deadline, just for your credibility. And if you need to send an updated version, that's fine. Does that make sense? Okay.
Everyone is silently cheering.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I'm cheering
yes,
on the inside.
more time, but that's the thing, when you're without deadlines, the tendency is to procrastinate. That's how I operate that way. So I get it. So yeah, some of my best writing is under the gun, and I read it back later and I go, wow, I wrote that. Wow, that's good. That's desperation, right?
I must be smart.
It's like delirium more than desperation. Because you're so tired and you finally have to. My best writing is stream of conscious writing. So
It forces you to think. It's you have to put something down. So you're like, well, I have to think of something. So you
or
just think of
you
it.
don't overthink. Yeah, when you just have to get it out on paper, and it all just comes out. Or you don't agonize over every sentence. Writing for me is agonizing. So I want it to flow. I'm always thinking, okay, I don't want a passive verb, and how can I reword this, and how can I make this sentence blend with this sentence? Like, it is literally.
I have a tendency to write a paragraph and then reread that and then
That's good though.
Yeah.
That's why it's important to get that first draft down, because y'all will self-edit before I even look at your paper.
So it makes it go a lot longer than if I just started typing, didn't think go back back until I got a lot down.
Signposting is really, really, really important for your papers. Get headings in place. And hopefully you'll have an intro, part 1, part 2, part 3, and conclusion, but you'll have subparts too. So just be thinking about that as you're working, where your paper logically flows and where you signal the reader what you're doing. You don't have to have an outline on the front of your paper. Some students do that, but it doesn't really count towards your page total or your word limit, but it's a well-constructed paper. The reader can follow. Because your intro will have a short section. Part 1 of this paper, blah, blah, blah. Part 2, blah, blah, blah. Common comments that I give on rough drafts are remember page numbers, add more signposting, let's see, do that intro section, add a short description of the layout of your paper, and yeah, that's pretty much the most common thing. But other than that, it's more individualized after that. Okay, any questions on that? No? Everybody doing okay? All right. Let's see. So, papers, questions, rough drafts, papers. Any questions on the final papers? I know it's a little preliminary for that. So. But I will send some sample papers this week in y'all's preparation of your rough draft. Okay. Anything else? Okay. All right. So are we ready to start? All right. Let's dig in to Dworkin. And y'all can't be quiet. I might go to sleep. Okay, Ronald Dworkin. Ronald Dworkin is the best known, another one of our best, and most influential legal theorist of the current generation of English language legal theorists. Outside of legal theory, Dworkin has also been influential in his work on constitutional theory, political theory, especially on the nature of equality, and morally rated policy questions like civil disobedience, affirmative action, and pornography. Dworkin's jurisprudential work has evolved significantly from an early phase focused on a critique of Hart's legal positivism to a later phase honing and recharacterizing the approach as an interpretive theory of law. I think he self-describes his work as a sophisticated alternative to legal positivism. So his early work basically introduced 3 things. First, the distinction between rules and principles, and we'll talk about that, and the related argument that legal systems contain both rules and principles, and a Hartian rule of recognition could not account for the existence of legal principles. And remember Hart's rules of recognition, right? Do y'all remember what that is? What's a rule of recognition? That's how Hart describes what law is.
Like when society recognizes it as law.
And what are the rules? What do we recognize as rules? Like we know it when something's the law and when it isn't, right? And
it's just by like our it's just like we know it based on
our laws, right? It's our codified laws, common law, I guess. But the rule of recognition would be the statute, the legislature, the municipal codes, consider that legally bind us, right? Yeah. And so Dworkin said, that doesn't cover not that simple. Yeah. The second part of his early work was the idea that courts are forums of principle. The connected ideas that courts must resolve the disputes before them on the basis of principles rather than policy, okay? And that one party in every dispute enters the dispute with a legal right to win, basically saying there is a right, there is a winner in any legal dispute. Somebody is, it's not a question of they're both equally right. There's one right answer, right? And that there's a single correct right answer, known as the right answer theory. And the critical reaction that evoked dominated much of the secondary literature on Dworkin in the early years of his work. So that is a controversial idea, that there is one true right answer. It's hard to imagine that, right? Third, courts should resolve the disputes before them by creating the theory of what the law requires that simultaneously adequately fits the existing legal data, identify the applicable law, and made the law the best it could be. So, first of all, identify, and y'all do that naturally when you do IRAC, right? Issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. That's IRAC. Right? In connection with the second and third themes, Dworkin spoke of a hypothetical judge who sneezed. This sounds so silly, doesn't it? But, yeah, a hypothetical judge Hercules who has superhuman abilities and unlimited resources. Dworkin argued that there are right answers even to hard legal questions. But the fact is that quite able judges and lawyers can and do disagree about what the correct outcome is for hard cases. We know that. Have y'all heard Professor Alton always used to say, reasonable minds can differ. Have y'all heard him say that? Reasonable minds can differ. Now, I always thought that would be a good drinking game for his class. He would say, reasonable minds can differ. Kind of funny. Yeah. But anyway, Dworkin maintains that though there are right answers, these answers are not always demonstrable, so that reasonable jurists will disagree. Dworkin argues that the reason that competent jurists disagree is that they do not have the means to take into account fully and appropriately all the legal materials that might bear on a dispute. What does that sound like?
Malpractice or
It's almost like natural law, right? Where right reason, you have to define it from nature or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to seek the true one right answer. Yeah.
The existence of the uncertainty, the word, back to behavioral analysis, positive law means we're positive this is the law. I mean, at some level.
Yeah.
And here he's saying, well, yeah, there is a law, there absolutely is a law, and there absolutely is a right answer, but we can get it wrong.
Right, yeah, because we don't have every resource available, which I always wondered, did you write that before Westlaw existed? Can you imagine having to do research on an issue before Westlaw and having to find what courts have held what and where, and, now you just put in a string of words and send it over and stuff, yeah. But, okay, so Dworkin's later work reworked and recharacterized his earlier work in a philosophically more sophisticated form. His theory of constructive interpretation and integrity. Okay, so let's backtrack to earlier writings. His earlier writings challenged the version of legal positivism that viewed law as being comprised entirely of rules. provision in which resources for resolving disputes according to law were more numerous and varied. Along with rules, legal systems also contain legal principles. So, what is the difference between a rule and a principle?
There's a logical distinction because they rules are kind of, if you think digital and analog, engineers in here will understand that. Well, digital is on or it's off,
Yeah.
and in the rule environment, the rule applies. It's on. It's 100% on, or it's off if it doesn't apply or if the facts if it's called into question. The rule applies or it doesn't apply. It's 1 or 0. In a principle environment, it's kind of the analog radio signal. It's, well, this principle is indicated, but this other principle overwhelms it. Or this principle applies, but we've got to modify it a little bit for this. So the principles are the analog signal, and the rules are the digital signal. And of course, being analog, they're more sophisticated because they might sort of apply, they might apply a lot, they might be really overwhelming, or they might not really, they're true, but they don't come into question here. Whereas a rule-based thing, you know, hey, we got the rule, we got facts, boom, oh, guilty, or not guilty.
So it should be more contextual, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. Were you gonna say anything else? Okay.
It's like, they're not, the principles aren't necessarily dispositive, but in the space we're looking for,
Yeah.
rules are more black and white, and maybe principles are more gray.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good way to describe it. So, where do we find principles, legal principles?
Legal maxims,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily in statutes or case law. Well, I suppose you could find it as like dicta,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily a statute.
Yeah, right. You wouldn't find it codified anywhere, but it would exist in legal opinions, right? So, my notes, I have, there are moral propositions that are stated in or implied by past official acts. So, they may be just a moral proposition that comes out of a case or something. Did y'all, what is an example? What's an example of principle?
Like that you can't profit from your own wrongdoing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, y'all are tracking my notes. I guess my notes are tracking the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, that's not a law, right? There's no statute or codified law that says one should not profit from one's wrong, or one is liable for all foreseeable consequences. It's more of it's written into a case, right? And y'all have done that in your case study method. It's just in contrast that you think each case kind of builds on the other, and you look back, well, what was the rule that came out of that case, but then how did the results get changed, you know? And sometimes it wasn't by a black letter law, it was more just, well, no, in this case, we can't really apply that rule. Yeah. I think one of the examples in the book was the guy that killed his family member to collect money on an insurance policy. Hmm?
Yeah, it was grandfather.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The 1889 case.
Yeah, the black letter law says,
Or-
yeah, if it's death of a relative, you inherit. You know, you're the beneficiary. But if you kill him to get that money, that doesn't seem quite right. So the principle is, one should not profit from one's wrong.
Well, and then they also had another principle in there that now I can't find it, but it basically it says you can't use the legal system to perform an unjust, inequitable, and obviously, yep, it's my money now because the law says it is.
Yeah,
That,
right. Or you can't take some drug dealer to court for sniffing you on your drug purchase, or you got something that wasn't the actual product.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, principles have weight that favor a result, right? So that's an example of how a principle can turn different, you know. Sometimes there are competing principles, though, that favor contrary results. So in any given case, there may be one or more principles that the judge would have to choose from, right? Which principle would we apply? And I think the example in the book was that that motor car purchase where I guess a warranty on the sale of a car had a very limited warranty, but when there was a steering wheel defect, and on one hand you had principles of contract law where, hey, you're held to the benefit of your bargain, you agreed to that. On the other hand, can large corporations do that and limit right away all of their liability? Interesting, yeah. So judges under Dworkin's theory are told to decide cases not on moral principles, but instead based on those principles relied on or implicit in past official action. So Dworkin is not going all moral. The principle has to exist, right, from some prior case or application in law, right? So in that sense, they're positivists, right? You can't just apply a principle that isn't
Hasn't been articulated yet
right.
by somebody
Right.
in some competent jurisdiction somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to be able to cite to it, I suppose, instead of just say, well, that's not right. Yeah, you have to be able to articulate exactly where it came from. So, however, Dworkin himself has noted and criticized this aspect of his early work. So, I guess his early work said it has to prove it good. Maybe his later work said, well, they're not going to be that hard to do. Because of the numerous combinations of rules and principles, judges basically sift through and find the combination that fits best. I call it Army style. Making the law the best it can be the best it can be. Pick out the best.
But under the you've got to find it somewhere.
Yeah.
You've got to find one case somewhere where the judge said this. In that case, it's just an army of one.
An army of one. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So summing up early Dworkin, the law contains principles and rules, and for nearly all legal questions there are unique right answers. So how are principles distinct from legal exceptions? And what is a legal exception? Like y'all have done that in your outline probably. You have the general rule and then the exception, and different exceptions. How are principles different?
Legal exceptions are kind of like loopholes to the rule.
Or they're actually codified exceptions, right? Maybe there's a codified exception about mailbox rule. That would be something that is, assuming, well, what is mailbox rule, right?
Acceptance of the contract dates from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Normally acceptance would be when you accept it, but mailbox rule kicks in. You mail it, that can go by the postmark date. But that's codified.
I don't know that it's codified, but I was going to say that's kind of an example of, at the beginning, Dworkin said, well, all this stuff really exists, and there is one right answer, But sometimes we can't get there because the nature of reality limits our time, our resources, our ability to process information, and, the judge might not have the biggest brain, whatever it is. I mean, there are limits. Well, the fact that there are exceptions is an acknowledgement of the limitations of reality, such that if we applied this rule in some kind of straightforward fashion, we just couldn't get it done. The result would be either non-existence or inequitable. The mailbox rule is a good example because, hey, I said yes, and then you gave the deal to the other guy, but my yes predated his yes.
Yeah.
And so
But then, I think that's probably codified in the UC.
I'm sure it is somewhere. But
Yeah, I think it is.
my point is having an exception that is sort of judicially imposed, because otherwise things don't work. I think that's a bow to the physical limitations of reality and resource constraints and all that.
Yeah, right, yeah. I agree with you. So, how is Dworkin positivist?
And we're sort of just using legal rules and statutes, anything that's been written in the cases. I mean, it just seems like we're using everything that's in Westlaw and Lexis, and not really going beyond it.
Right, exactly. So, it's a purely rules-based approach to law. Rules and principles that exist in law. How is Dworkin natural law?
This is my answer. I don't know if it's right, but it seems he's following the premises of natural. You use right reason, you use logic, and basically everything the natural law people do, he says we need to do that with the starting with the positive law, the written texts.
Did anybody have another answer to that?
It's like we're the principles of everything is based on natural law.
Exactly, yeah, so moral standards qualify the rule. So when, there is some injection of morality when you're picking and choosing whether you're going to enforce a rule, so long as there's a moral principle that can kind of tweak it a little to come up with the right answer. Yeah, unlike positivists, if we look at Dylan and explorers, it's just flat out. That's what the rule says. So moral standards don't apply, or rules won't apply if the result is absurd or inequitable, if it's not fair, or if it's ridiculous, then rules won't apply. That's basically being able to say, yeah, we get that it's a rule, but it's not going to apply anyway.
The jurist's right reason overwhelms the rule,
Yeah.
which is the superiority of natural law.
Yeah. I call it a sod, T-S-A-R. That shit ain't right.
I thought that was the name of the Russian monarch.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
That's a Texas term, sod. T-S-A-R. Okay, so, all right. On to the next aspect of Dworkin. Well, let me ask y'all this question. If every case has a single right answer, how does Dworkin explain when competent jurists disagree? We said it already. This is kind of a full point. Exactly. They just don't have access to all the data.
I was gonna say though, I totally agree. Sometimes they don't have access, they don't have all the time in the world. But I mean, a lot of cases, there's like unclear law. I mean, it goes up to the Supreme Court. There's circuit splits.
Even at the Supreme Court.
Right. Yeah. And presumably it's gone through the appellate process, they've seen everything that's relevant. So I think in some cases, even if you had all the law, you might not be able to find the answer.
Well, it's not just necessarily having all the law, it's having the cognitive
Yeah,
ability
well.
to interpret that law. Can you look at it in an unbiased manner, which as human beings, we can't look at things in a completely unbiased manner. Exactly. Yeah. And we all kind of approach issues with our own biases. Right?
Well, that is the definition of right reason, attempting to get to right reason. And, the flaws, the inherent moral flaws, and flaws of, not really cognitive flaws, not flaws in the logical process, the failure of the right part of right reason.
Yeah, which, and we can agree or disagree if that's valid, if there is a right reason. Yeah.
Well, right, but if there's
ordained from nature.
but if there isn't a right reason, then we could eliminate about 80% of this reading and just say, what did Forrest Gump say to the drill sergeant? Because Justice Kennedy told us to. It's real simple.
Yeah.
We don't need right reason.
That's
Right
what
reason doesn't exist.
Right,
He's the fifth vote. He's right.
You're jumping ahead to realism. Yeah. No, right.
I mean, those are our choices.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about constructive interpretation. In his later work, Dworkin offered what he called an interpretive approach to law. Basically reworking his earlier themes into a more sophisticated philosophical framework. Interpretive judgment combines backward and forward-looking elements. And recall his earlier work were strictly backward-looking. According to Dworkin, every time a judge is confronted with a legal problem, the judge should construct a legal theory of what the law is. First of all, identify the law. And the theory should fit the relevant past decisions. So if we're saying, this is property law. Okay, let's look at case law or statutes that apply in property law. So the theory should fit the relevant past decisions while making the law the best it can be. And that's what I have. The question IRAC. That's it, right? Issues. Identify the issue. Identify the rule. Go through your analysis. And conclude. Pretty straightforward. I've read the motto page 65. Okay, so this is the Henningsen versus Bloomberg murder. What was the issue in Henningsen?
Whether or how much an automobile manufacturer may limit his liability in case the automobile is defective.
Mm-hmm. And so what happened? Henningsen did what?
He bought a car, signed a contract, certain terms in the contract, warranty.
And then what happened? Something bad happened, right?
Yeah, I guess there was a.
I guess there was a bad crash.
Yeah, it doesn't really say.
Yeah.
Something in the contract was triggered, right? Specifically.
Yeah, right. Henningsen argued that the car manufacturer ought to be liable for medical and other expenses of people injured in the crash. There was no law on point except for contract law. He signed the contract. What result? There was a general principle Here we have different principles that, I guess the judge referenced and could have applied. One, in the absence of fraud, one who does not read contract cannot later relieve himself of burden, right? That's the benefit of the bargain in the absence of fraud. That's a principle. Another principle, freedom of contract is important. We want people to have freedom of contract. But here's another principle, not so important, where in our society, where the automobile is a common and necessary adjunct of daily life, and its use is fraught with danger. In that situation, the manufacturer is under a special obligation. We're selling cars that people drive on the road. They have some kind of a special obligation to make them safe. Yeah. Another principle, courts will not permit themselves to be used as instruments of inequity and injustice. So in that case, maybe the automobile manufacturers were maybe being sloppy, saving money, cutting corners, and then having these adhesion contracts that basically limited their liability in case something went wrong. And that is an unjust bargain. So we all see kind of how there's different principles at work. So what is the court to do? What are they to decide? Do they just rely on the general principle? Hey, you signed the contract, you agree. Or is something not right there? Like, what other principles can be drawn from to make sure that this guy gets released? And that the judge wanting to, like, thinking about the result he wanted and finding the principles that could get him there. Yeah. So this constructive interpretation makes it the best possible example of the form or genre to which it is taken to belong. So again, it's like looking backward at the applicable law and the principles at work, and then looking forward, how can we draw from the general rules and principles to get the best results moving forward. If y'all could think about principles in different areas of law, what kind of principles can you see coming out of property law? If you think about property law, what do you think the law is there to do?
To help people protect their own property.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did y'all get the bundle of sticks analogy? You know, yeah. Protecting your expectations. What do you think family law principles at work there? What are the underlying principles?
Protecting the family unit and what's in the best interest of the child.
Exactly, yeah, best interest. Yeah. We think of other areas of law where there's some driving principle that kind of drives that, the philosophy in that area. What else do you want?
Well, I think the contract example has a lot of, there have been a lot of, the UCC creates, the principle of the UCC is get the deal done. Commerce, let commerce go.
Yeah.
So that's the for the sale of goods, that's the principle.
And meeting expectations, the benefit of the bargain, how does our economy survive if people aren't held to their bargains? Yeah.
There's rules in land sales or in contracts that take longer than a year to perform that, hey, it's got to be in writing.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's just memories fade, property's big and important. We don't want some sale of property to be unrecorded. So kind of the orderly administration is a principle.
What kind of principles do y'all think have criminal law?
I think that it helps criminal law protect I mean, I guess it depends on the standpoint, but like for instance, Professor Penrose, when she does her appellate work, she's like, I want to make sure that the people, even though they broke the law, that they get every opportunity afforded to them as provided by the
Yeah.
Constitution. So
That's a good, yes, that is an underlying principle in due process. And deterrence, right, deterring crime, that's the purpose of why we punish, right, what are our punishment rationales?
Well, also deterring vigilantism.
Exactly, yeah, the state needs to step in to prevent, it's kind of a social contract, right? That the state agree to take on that, but people don't take matters into their own hands.
I guess those two underlying jurisprudential theories of criminal law is the one is what's the word for even for maximum good to the maximum people? Utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is one theory, and then the other theory is justice for justice sake. I can't remember. There's another legal word for that. But those two theories are in quite a bit of tension, and we kind of serve both of those some of the time.
What do you think, Jose? What are some death penalty rationales, or any punishment for that matter?
Retribution.
Yes, retribution, just desert. They just atone, take what they've done, up to the morally equivalent level. What are other punishment rationales?
Deterrence.
Deterrence, we need to deter other people. Rehabilitation, and kind of, that's for sure in juvenile law, juvenile criminal law. That is the objective, rehabilitation. Yeah. And think about it. Yeah, tort, what do y'all think is principles driving tort law? Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah. And just about every subject area of law has some driving principle that the law is kind of made to promote that underlying principle, those goals. Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Do you think they're all consistent? I mean, I have a feeling sometimes some people would say, oh, the goal of criminal law is only deterrence, and then maybe somebody who have more nuanced opinion.
It's almost like jurisprudence where you just look at different facets.
Yeah.
You can view it from a positive law standpoint or a natural law standpoint. In criminal law, most of what drives it, I think, is exactly what y'all have all said. Monica has said, the preventing vigilantism, that's social contract, but also deterrence and retribution in the community. Yeah, deterring future crime, that's why we punish criminals. We don't want them to do it again, and we don't want other people to do it either. So we have a big hammer hanging over everybody. Don't do that, or else.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there are other rationales, obviously, but those are competing principles,
Right.
aren't they?
Yeah.
We wouldn't execute somebody if we were wanting to promote rehabilitation. Yeah, really, maybe sometimes punishment might work for deterring others, but it's not going to help rehabilitate. We don't really believe that when we send all these people to prison, they're going to rehabilitate. Isn't that worse? Damaged goods almost.
Much of the experience of prison and that thing over the last 50 years has basically been recidivism rates are X at this time of life, and after this time of life they go down.
Right.
And so if you put them in prison after the first offense for long enough, they will be out of that time of high recidivism and have a chance to be, working in a car wash somewhere.
maybe.
maybe.
Yeah, and true, like in the eighties, the policy was build more prisons, get these drug dealers off our streets. That was all about incapacitation, get rid of the problem. But then eventually they have to come back out, then that whole theory kind of cut against the idea of retribution and deterrence, and maybe rehabilitation, probably more than anything. Okay, so,
There's a bill in the Senate got out of the Judiciary Committee to drastically reduce a lot of sentences at the federal level that is struggling with
Yes.
this exact topic.
yeah, exactly, yeah, and it's a drain on society for low-level drug crimes, and now people aren't as non-violent. So, I have a note here, page 94, note 15, of 6. In his most recent work, Dworkin has recharacterized his text in terms of the truth conditions for propositions of law. The proposition of law is true if it flows from principles of personal or political morality that provide the best interpretation of the other propositions of law generally treated as true in contemporary legal practice. I guess the proposition of law is true if it flows and gives from prior interpretation, political and personal morality, if that gives the better answer. That seems kind of amorphous, doesn't it?
It's very contextual.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, what he's saying is, does this fit in the same moral framework or politically moral framework as other rules that are considered true?
Exactly, yeah. So Dworkin also writes of political integrity, the view that judges should decide cases in a way that makes the law more coherent and preferring interpretations that favor a single moral vision. So he's looking for consistency, right, in interpretation. Dworkin wrote, judges who accept the interpretive ideal of integrity decide hard cases by trying to find in some coherent set of principles about people's rights and duties the best constructive interpretation of the political structure and legal doctrine of their community. Find the best fit for whatever that community is. Maybe that almost opens up the idea that it could differ between communities, which I'm sure we could see that. Ideas of justice might differ geographically, demographically.
That idea is going to blow up. I mean, it's going to be bigger and bigger as we dilute what existing common culture we have left. Because every community is going to have its own deal. Of course, the most radical example would be, well, you forced the sexual mutilation on that young girl, but hey, we're all Muslims, and that's what we do. Some do.
But what is interesting though is, and you did touch on that, like we're in this zone of libertarianism right now where I'm okay, you're okay, we're all okay, you know,
Do
anything
your own
goes,
thing, yeah.
anything goes. And then where is our structure, you know? And I've always said that's the purpose of our mandatory education, secondary and elementary school education, is to get people at least on some baseline of common thread. Not to educate, not to make better workers or anything like that. It's strictly to create a baseline citizen. You know, at least, you know, where everything goes, you know, at least we have some baseline of citizenship. That's my opinion. key.
Not really the class so much, but when I teach second grade, we were recently having a debate about
Oh,
like
interesting.
school.
Uh-huh.
But I was asking, so what do they do in like kindergarten? And she said, well, basically they just teach kids how to be people.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was really funny, but it sounds.
It is funny. Like, I remember my son came home in first grade and I would ask him what he was doing, and then I later called the teacher, where's the homework? And she said, no, we have to level the class, because people come in at different levels, entering school. So all those smart kids kind of just have to sit there and twiddle their thumbs while they bring up the rest of the class, because it's more efficient to teach everybody on one level than to have to vary your instructions per kid, which I hated that. And I always thought it was dumbing down, but
I mean, it is.
it is.
There's no other way to do it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
exactly. But the goal isn't to make them smart, it's to keep them, at least know how to be socially, I don't know, coexisting. Society, right?
To use the bathroom the right way.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Learn how to raise your hand, stand in line, wait your turn, all those, yeah.
Kind of a social brainwashing.
It is. Yeah.
We have all these conspiracies against kindergarten now.
all of.
That's
kindergarten.
why I'm such a free thinker, because I skipped kindergarten.
It's so funny.
No, it wasn't mandatory
Yeah, everything
back in
you
the day.
need to know you learned in kindergarten, or what's that book? Yeah, it's true though, right? Or playground morality. Yeah. That's something though, yes. So, here's a question. How is this system based on integrity different from common law reasoning?
I don't think it's real different.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why I have that note in here, but maybe that was from one of the questions in the book. But how is the system based on integrity different from common law reasoning?
It sounds like a realist question, might be. It's like the mechanical common law. You just use logic. It's basic syllogisms, IRAC.
Yeah, what I have is decision-making based in part on consistency, so it's sensitive to principle, and on a belief that past decisions are rough approximations or intuitions regarding justice and fairness. So if we look at past precedent, that's where we kind of get the moral compass that's going to guide us. Yeah.
He says on page 95, it's in a parentheses, more recent work clarifies integrity as simply the outcome of the proper balance of fit and moral value. And to me, that's common law all over it. I mean, because, hey, well, we've been doing it that way, and that's sort of
the
fine.
general is this,
and then this thing, and there's the fit.
So it is kind of common law reasoning. It's more like it than not like it, right? Yeah, exactly. So Dworkin's writings attempt to address or come to terms with aspects of legal practice that are not easily explained by positivism. For example, participants don't agree on how the system works, how to interpret ambiguous statutes, and this is criticizing positivism, right? People don't always agree on how you're going to interpret an ambiguous statute or how to apply a constitutional provision. Even in the hardest of hard cases, parties speak of a unique, correct answer. And in erratically changing landmark cases where law appears to have changed drastically, judges and commentators speak of a new rule having already been present. Law works its way through by rules drawn from the fountain of justice And we've seen, judges say, and in fact, Justice Kennedy just did that, like, just saying, oh, no, Scalia, that's the example, the search and seizure cases, the, dog sniff, or not I'm talking about U.S. versus Jones, the GPS tracking case. Because our law developed to reasonable expectation of privacy, the development of the law along that line basically it would have been held, yeah, sticking the GPS tracker on the outside of a car, you have no reasonable expectation of where you drive on public roads and on the outside of your car. So Scalia was really, like, he is a big proponent and protector of Fourth Amendment rights, and he said, no. We're going all the way back to trespass law. That would be like a constable hiding under a carriage, and that's trespass on your personal property. So he had to go, and he said, this law has been in existence forever and ever and ever. Yeah, maybe we don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy, but we do have a property right. So Fourth Amendment law, but under his rationale, he said, this is age-old law. This has been here forever.
You can't throw a rock on my property. Right? You can't. You're not allowed
But still,
to.
I mean, there's some trash, and does that not say stop? I mean, I guess when you just go, you put it out to your thing.
They've discarded.
I know, but I'm just saying, any type of reasonable expectation of privacy can be related back to property issues.
And now with technology changing so drastically and fast, like that FLIR, the heat sensing, you can fly an airplane over and see, y'all remember the Boston Marathon bomber? You could see in the outline of the guys in the boat, hiding in the boat, like just by zooming in on heat sensors. And dog sniff, those cases are big right now because dogs have extra sensory perception. They can actually smell through into a house where you have some advanced expectation of privacy. So just with advances in technology, that's throwing a whole new wrinkle in what law enforcement can and can't do, the reach of the law. So I call this the buffet. It's like a culinary masterpiece and I think of a big salad bar where you've got all your options, lettuce, tomatoes, cauliflower, eggs, whatever, and you're creating the best salad you can, but you're drawing from all the ingredients, separate ingredients, to make the best fit.
So it all gets down to choice and making the hopefully right choices.
Yeah, but under Dworkin, it's finding the unique one right answer.
Right.
Yeah. So, for Dworkin, existing law is merely pre-interpreted data. So, I guess maybe I gave away my question. What is pre-interpreted data?
Existing law.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're listening.
We can regurgitate. We're law students.
Yeah. No, but but existing law and principles too, right? Just pre-existing data, rules, principles, anything that's out there in the legal world, right? Pre-interpreted data. But those are just merely the ingredients. You can't offer an answer to a current legal question until some order is imposed on the pre-interpreted data. You've got to get it all lined up in the right order, the right consistency, and that involves the moral political choice. A moral choice, a political choice. It involves choosing between and among. So, what about cases that are on point? Say the pre-interpreted data is clear. If you wanted to if Dworkin thought there was a different right answer than what is in pre-interpreted data, how would you argue? How would you reframe it?
I think the example that you gave with Justice Scalia is the perfect answer to that. You would say, well, yeah, all that's true over there, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about property rights. It's his car, man. You can't mess with somebody's car.
Exactly.
And so
yes.
it's the change the subject type.
Spin it, right? Yeah, what else? How else could you?
You could just put more weight on a different principle.
Exactly, yeah. Or you would argue that language is ambiguous. If we know it says that, but there's some ambiguity there. Or, so you would have to be creative in how you, or you might say, it's too broad. Broadly applied, maybe, but in this narrow context, or flip it and say, that's too narrow. We need to give it a broader interpretation. So that's how you play with laws like that. If you're arguing to a judge or writing a brief or persuading your client and the law is pretty clear, how would you can say, that's not fair. You know, judges aren't going to listen to that. You have to make a good legal argument, right? What legal argument would you make? Too broad, too narrow, ambiguous. You know, you find a way to attack it. Find some legal principle out there, some pre-interpreted data or some political moral argument besides just unfair. And articulate it. Does that make sense? Maybe we should come up with a concrete example. Okay, so what are advantages and disadvantages to Dworkin's approach? What's an advantage?
I think it's kind of like you were talking. Well, I think positivism is a little too rigid, and it's hard to use that practically because if you just apply black letter laws to everything, there's really no room to even talk about facts because you have to apply it. But here, I think it gives positivism a little bit more leeway to look at other circumstances and decide, kind of like your ran the red light thing. I mean, yeah, you know that you're not supposed to run the red light, but is that really the principle why we're punishing you? Is that why you're punished? No. And so don't you think that maybe in that case you could have gotten a little bit of leeway? And I think that's
or
kind
an
of,
ambulance is coming behind you and you need to get out of the way, you know, like it's, yeah.
yeah, I think that it creates kind of legal system that we have now where you're able to, what you said to do, take the pre-interpretive data and argue it in different ways so it's not just so rigid.
That's a good explanation.
I agree with the conclusion, but I don't agree so much with the premise that positive law is rigid. I think positive law is very expansive because it's whatever Justice Kennedy says it is. So it can go anywhere. Positive law can go anywhere.
Well, that's creating law.
But once it's created, it's positive law.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's no limit on positive law. But what Dworkin is suggesting is that there are some limits. It has to comply with this integrity requirement. You have to have some kind of interpretive scheme to apply the law because just plunking down, well, there's the facts and there's the law and there's the answer. Practically speaking, except in some traffic court cases, you can't apply it that way.
I see it, yeah, exactly.
So what he does is it's bigger than a very rigid interpretation of rules, but at the same time it's more constrained than whatever Justice Kennedy decides that day.
It's not made up from whole cloth.
Right? No, it cannot be made up from whole cloth. It has to fit in the context of it.
Right. So my note, I have the advantage. The advantages of being able to reflect and account for the way that law is regularly subject to change and recharacterization. So So I guess it allows the law to evolve. Otherwise, we would be stuck with the same laws from age-old England or whatever. Yeah. What are its disadvantages?
I think that, like you said, reasonable minds can differ. My overriding moral principle in creating a law and enforcing that law might be different from yours. So I think that it kind of creates an inconsistency.
Mm-hmm. Any other disadvantages? Yeah. That's what I have. It emphasizes the possibility of revision too much and settlement too little. Where do we get settled laws? It's always subject to find some principle here, some principle there. Where do we have consistency? So it's a legal theory for or from the perspective of judges rather than the whole system, right? Maybe that's a disadvantage. It really kind of only applies for judges. What would be the result if citizens were to take up Dworkin's interpretive approach? Yeah, I know the law says I have to pay my taxes, but there's a principle in the law that we shouldn't be asked to give more than what you have. And I don't have it. Yeah. Or,
But people just choose not to follow the law because they have a principle against following it.
yeah.
Yeah. That, yeah, man.
It's like when you're a little kid and you're not supposed to be out past dark, and you're like, your mom's like, why were you out past dark? And you're like, but you don't want me to be out past dark because you don't want me to get lost. But I was just in the backyard, it's no big deal. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, exactly.
you could argue around. Well,
you
this
could
is your
rationalize
yeah.
anything, right? Based on some principle out there. Exactly. You want me to be independent, don't you?
Yeah.
You're raising me to be independent.
And there are so many different principles that, like, and anyone could bring up any principle for not following any law.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, I didn't kill her because I wanted the money. I killed her because I didn't like her. You know what I mean? So
It's funny, I feel like lawyers do that, frequently, so you just kind of try to spin it, rationalize it.
Aren't y'all the best rationalizers in your family? You pretty much rationalize.
So it's sort of a dangerous approach too. I mean, it's almost, I think it's kind of, I don't want to, it's sort of pretentious. I mean, it's like only intellectuals should do this.
Yeah, like I have down traffic laws, anti-pollution laws. I mean, we would have anarchy, right?
Well, but the temptation of lawyers is the chief fruit of these ideas. The temptation to whatever you can talk them into is right. Yeah, hey. And that has its own sort of destructive.
But when you're in court and you're asking the judge to make a decision, of course we're going to make the argument. It might not fly, but hey, if it does, yeah. Go ahead, Keith.
I don't know that I agree with like the anarchy kind of idea if individuals chose to apply Dworkin, because isn't like one of the two main tenets that it has to also fit with pre-existing law? So I don't know that it would really get to that situation where it would be like that bad.
That's interesting. Yeah.
But couldn't you argue that the pre-existing law wasn't the right answer, and that's why you didn't?
That's interesting. That's good thinking. Cause yeah, we're still trying to find the right answer.
Maybe I read it wrong, but I thought it had to do both. Like fit within the pre-existing stuff, but if there's a way to make it better, then do that also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So not one or the other, but both.
No, that's true. That is true.
But practically speaking, the requirement to fit will be overwhelmed by the requirement to fit me. If citizens are practicing it, if citizens are doing it, and the requirement to fit me is another word for anarchy. I think. I mean,
Yeah.
Well,
And-
it could lead to that, if law is just and I guess I see what Keith is saying, it's not that we would treat law as a guideline, it still has to be within what the law permits, but at the same time,
I guess I just feel like that would be tempered by the fact that they would still have to go before a judge who would also have to agree with you. I mean, you still, at least that's the way I think of it. I mean,
if you got sanctioned for it.
But all the people that are before a judge right now had to go before a judge. So does this approach, we're at some, let's call it whatever today is normal. If all the citizens adopted this, would we move normal in the direction of more individual autonomy to decide what the law is? And the answer is we probably would.
Yeah.
And would that lead more people in front of a judge? Yes, it would.
yes. I
And
agree with that.
so, yeah, maybe not anarchy,
Yeah.
but would the direction of society be moving that way? And I think the answer is probably.
I agree. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it goes quite so far as everybody's going to be running around.
Yeah.
Zombie apocalypse.
Yeah. So, yeah, it could be the sky is falling, it may not be that bad an application, but, hard to say. So, how would we criticize the right answer thesis? Like, how would we say,
Well, I think there just sometimes isn't a right answer. I mean, because, I'd mentioned it, I guess, earlier, circuit splits, if every appellate court from, like, district court, circuit courts, and then the Supreme Court can't figure it out, then, is there any more cognitive power in the world to figure it out?
yeah, right,
Yeah.
that's a good point, and I like that example of circuit split, because it's the same issue
Right.
in a different jurisdiction. Yeah, and does anybody else, how would you criticize?
Well, for me, it's when do we know that we're at the right answer? When the law changes. Not everything changes about the law, but some things change.
Mhm.
But even then, if people don't get to the right answer because they don't have the right tools, well, what are the tools that you need to get to the right answer?
Mhm.
And why do some have it and some don't when it's like two different appellate courts?
Exactly, yeah, and, yeah.
I also agree. I don't think there's really a right answer. Because it's too dependent on perspective, I think.
Exactly, yeah. I have who prioritizes what value is a better fit from another. That's who. Who's the decider? The right of the mother versus the right of the fetus. Who decides? Or the right of the state versus the right of an individual. Chief Justice Roberts in his Obergefell dissent said, "Who do we think we are?" That's like, who decides? Who decides that? Who is the moral arbiter?
I guess it's the Supreme Court for now, right?
Well, it's
For people.
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting in that Obergefell decision, the question of who do we think we are arose from the more traditional side.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
changing existing law for societies and cultures. And,
right. And and so the real question, and this is sort of the life on earth question, is it possible to figure it out and do it perfectly? And the answer, sometimes the answer is no. We're simply going to get the wrong answer. But sometimes the answer is, gee, awfully difficult to figure out the right answer. And and if that's the standard for the law, then the law has failed, and it will continue to fail, and no one should have any confidence in it. But I don't think that's the standard. I think going back to right reason, going back to a little humility, we're going to do the best we can. We don't have, it's like comparing law to the what's the latest physics theory, the general theory of relativity, or or the,
That's not the latest
that's
one.
not the, well, that's 1905, but that's back in my day, 1905. But anyway, but my point is, you have these ideas,
String
theory
yeah.
or something that haven't been proven, and so the physicists are struggling with string theory. But we still make computers that use physics. We still make airplanes. We still make rockets. It kind of, sort of, mostly works pretty good.
Right.
And that's
Right.
kind of, I think that should be our standard for the
And that was my
law.
next question, resolution. Can we have any resolution from Dworkin? Like, how can we at least resolve it? Like, or rather than criticize, can we come to some kind of, what's the value of the interpretive approach?
I kind of like the analogy Bill gave. I mean, it's digital or it's analog, and I think it's because if it was purely digital, we wouldn't need judges. You get a computer and you
Program with the rules.
program it with the rules and ready to go. I think it's kind of nice. We live in kind of an analog. It's
Yeah, and this is
interpretive
almost like
approach.
those awful, horrible SAT questions that there's not like the right answer, but the best answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't you hate those?
That's exactly
Yeah.
That's how you.
So there are at least best answers, and at least striving for the right answer helps us process the best answer. You know, yes, maybe there's not that perfect salad, but we can make it the best answer that we can.
I wanted to say, I don't want to veer off too much. I think it's interesting where you know Plato argued there is truth, there is a form out there.
Mm-hmm.
There definitely is, and I think I mean Aristotle I guess was the opposite of that, and it's I don't know, it's sort of, I don't know if it's distressing or sad, but you know, it seems that most people don't believe there is a true. I mean it.
Do you think it's sad that people don't believe?
I won't answer that.
I want to take that up because that's sort of the quintessential. I mean, it's a 2,500-year-old argument, right?
Yeah. It's old.
But the question is it's a two-parter. Is there truth out there, and can we see it perfectly? Or if we can't see it perfectly, three-parter, can we see enough of it to guide us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, I'm in the yep. There's a perfect truth out there. Nope, we can't see it because we're human beings and we got what we got. But can we see enough of it to go forward? And that's back to, well, what's the best answer? You know what I mean? Well, we can't get the perfect answer. I can't make this formula. It's not a computer, and I can't make the formula perfect. I can't figure out string theory.
Some of that's a hard pill to swallow because we might have our selfish motivations or desires that we don't really want to go on, or I'm trying to think of an example, but yeah. So Dworkin would argue that it is better that courts remain, to the extent possible, forms of principle. Courts should be forms of principle and at least attempt to answer problems within existing legal material. Right? The quote I have, the positivist picture of law as a system of rules has exercised a tenacious hold on our imagination, perhaps through its very simplicity. If we shake ourselves loose from this model of rules, we may be able to build a model truer to the complexity and sophistication of our own practices. They'll be so rigid. So Dworkin pulse point question. Is Dworkin's distinction between rule and principle a difference in kind or degree? Yeah. Yeah, I do too.
Because the rule is so absolute and the principle is
Yeah, you
so
can
not.
point to a rule.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are principles always moral?
I
I want to say no, but I can't think of one that's
Have an
not.
answer.
I mean, you know, Dworkin is in this natural positive, natural positive realm,
He
okay?
is, yeah.
And so, I think the natural law part of him is the principle law part, is the principle part of it.
Yeah.
And from that standpoint, it would seem that principles must be moral according to some morality, and I'm not.
Yeah,
and
that's what I think that's a good point, because principles involve morality, but they're not
They
necessarily
might not be your morality
moral, they
yeah.
could be immoral, like a
Yeah.
slave is treated as cattle and not human. Or think of some other principles, kids are better off with the mother.
There's a moral component to that, and it may or may not be true in every case,
That's the right,
but
yeah. Man is entitled to greater legal consideration than a woman.
But don't you think that those are kind of more of principles based on opinion, based on what your own morality may or may not be?
And based
Yeah.
on the time in which
Of
it
a
was.
culture, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a place and time, right.
So are morals always, or are principles always morals? Because that's what I was thinking, that they are, but they're not always the right morals, right? Yeah,
exactly.
so
Maybe
it's a yes
that's
and no
a
answer.
ambiguous question, are they always moral?
well,
Well, they involve morality, but
Yeah.
maybe not.
and social mores, which is something like morals, change over time.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
back in
We're
the
in transition.
well, yeah, we've been even you know 20, well, I don't know how long ago, but even in the Bible, in the Old Testament, men had multiple wives. In the New Testament, Jesus said, one's enough, boys, and so that constituted a change in morality. Could we today say 4 wives? There's nothing wrong with it. That's moral.
But people are still, and it may be based on ideas of monogamy, but people aren't always monogamous.
Oh yeah, serial monogamy is what we do here.
Yeah.
In the main.
Serial, no, we don't. That's why we have serial monogamy, right?
Because of the serial bigamy,
Right.
the serial.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of that goes back was more of a law of nature than really a law of morality. And
Yes.
mortality was an issue,
Well,
and so you needed to procreate.
And on an agriculture environment, big family, you got more of them boys out there behind the plow.
Right.
And you need
Right.
that.
Or did y'all see China ease their restrictions on
They
Yeah.
can have 2 babies
Yeah.
now.
Well, but
last week,
they're
wow.
it's interesting to look at their the population
They
issues.
need people.
Well, they're not as far down the hole as Japan is, but they're
Really?
pretty far down the hole. Japan is cratered. You look at their demography, it's conceivable because they're very ethnocentric. You can't immigrate to Japan. You can go over there and live, but you can never be
Do you
Japanese.
think that's one of our social, political reasons opposing abortion, is to make sure that we stay populated?
I've been an anti-abortion guy since 1973, and that's never been my reason, but it is certainly.
But why would government count?
It's a practical reason, because you can't keep the money coming if there's no people to pay, and if there's no tax base. I mean, all of Western Europe is seeing this.
Because people like to use religious reasons to rally, but what's a governmental interest?
Well, I
These
think.
elected officials, they
I-
need to be elected.
I
So they
think.
play on people's
That's what I
personal.
think too.
Well, I do think the government I say the government. I do think people have genuine, you just subtly ascribed ulterior motives to people who profess religious views, okay?
In politics,
In politics, I don't disagree with
yeah.
that. But most people that I have a big social circle, and we're all pretty conservative.
But that's the argument that plays with you.
Well, but we check.
Yeah.
We're not idiots. We're, most
But most people
informed.
are dumb, actually. Yeah.
I like how it's fast. Yep.
Yeah,
True.
yeah.
Well, and so the dumbassery is restricted to the religious side?
No, the dumbassery is, kind of relegated to the rhetoric of the politicians.
On both sides?
Right.
Right.
Like, look at the immigration arguments coming out of Republicans right now, and it's all really designed to prevent massive new Democrats coming up in the world,
Well,
with
so
numbers.
So do you think that their interest is 100% limiting Democrat voters?
Yes.
Okay, well, I think you're probably wrong, but maybe you are.
Wait, so you think that the government has their hand in abortion issues purely for political election purposes?
I don't want to go on record saying that.
I've got the microphone right here.
I know, it has nothing to do with
Just
class, I'm just
speak up.
curious.
No, and our class is a forum for these ideas,
Sure it is.
right?
Right.
And whether I think it or not, we can make the argument and talk about it.
Right.
So sometimes I do think that, because I've always wondered, what is the state's interest? Why do they care? Why do they care?
They want to be reelected. I mean, there was a judge up in Denton County who approved an adoption for a not normal couple, and they weren't reelected the next term. And so I think it's kind of a cover your ass. I want to make sure I stay in this position, so I've got to do what's most politically agreeable.
Yeah, elected
Right.
judges, for sure, yeah. Yeah. And we've seen political arguments that we think, that's not the real reason they're doing that. But they make arguments that play to the masses,
Well,
Not necessarily the masses.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean, it's just like Bernie Sanders talking about free college. Does he? Do I think he really believes in free college? I actually think he does. I think Bernie Sanders' arguments are all made in good faith.
Well, yeah, but
So
sometimes there's political
I'm willing to give Bernie Sanders an argument in good faith, but I think some conservative candidates make arguments in good faith as well.
Oh, both sides, of course.
Right.
Yeah. So, do you feel bad? Do you think my examples are one-sided?
Oh, Professor, compared to law school professors,
Yeah.
you are the picture of equanimity.
Oh.
Yeah, but that's a very low standard.
Maybe that's
Give it a
my wish
compliment
list.
and take it
Right.
away.
I see all the arguments, I can't decide. Yeah, no, I know what you're saying though, yeah. But it is interesting, for sure. So, next question. Would Dworkin have to accept that principle, or would he have to accept such principles like a kid is better off with a mother, or a man is entitled to greater legal consideration than a woman? Would Dworkin have to accept such principles if they happen to comport with some judge's sense of appropriateness?
I think we're back to proper balance of fit and moral value. And, you might, once again, it might be fact specific. Is this a tort case where the mother lost a woman lost her arm? And what are her damages? And, there might be some issue there where, the standard was thus for a working man, the standard is this for a working woman, the standard is this for a man who worked with his hands, the standard is that for a law professor that lost his left arm. How is he really damaged? Well, he's hurt and he's suffered and he doesn't. But a concert pianist would be different. See, so it, does it fit and is it moral? I think he could accept it possibly, but it would have to be more than the judges.
But he doesn't have to accept it, right? Because all you have to do is
Right.
look forward
Right.
instead of look back.
He
Yeah.
could accept it, but he
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily have to.
Mhm. So where do principles come from in the first place? They have to be found in a court opinion, right? But where do they come from? How do we get them?
I had a theory, and it probably isn't right, but I think that this is sort of my answer. Where does common law come from? I think it came
Yeah,
from
yeah, exactly.
the English judges experiencing life, perhaps not being too educated, but trying to come up with some theory of justice with their life experiences and seeing everything they
The
saw.
way they were raised and taught and their morality and yeah.
Yeah.
So does that just mean made up principles?
There's a line in one of these books, about interpretive. It's on the top of page 94, bottom of 93, 94. One can think of constructive interpretation as similar to the way people have looked at collections of stars and seen their pictures of mythic figures, or the way modern statistical methods can analyze points on a graph and determine what line and correlation between variables best explains the data.
Mm-hmm.
Those are actually two completely opposite things.
Yeah.
Okay, and having the author, I guess
Emerging
Bix,
patterns.
having the author mix those, really said a bad thing to me about his ability to create analogies, because one of those is making stuff up.
Right.
One of those is making stuff up. The other one is discovering the underlying truth. And I think to a great degree, the judges, the English judges, who may or may not have been less educated than we are,
Well, they were white
Many of them
male.
that were more
Yeah.
educated. Well,
Yeah.
well,
They
I
represent-
don't see that as an indictment, quite frankly. Sorry. It's the best justice system in the world. Is it perfect?
Yeah,
Nope.
right.
But was it the best answer that we could come up with at the time? Yes, it was. So people want to take shots at that kind of stuff, and I just go, well, what was your other choices? But at the end of the day, they're trying to uncover the truth behind this stream of data.
So it is like there's this lurking right answer, your forms, your chairness,
Right.
of Plato.
Chairness, yeah,
see,
sure.
Something, it's emerging, it's this pattern, it's there, yeah.
I
We're
think,
striving to, see it clear. But I like looking at it, law, as more art than science, like it is like artistic and not so much rigid and formulated. There has to be some pattern in place to keep us all kind of tethered, but yeah. Interesting. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like it's more going off what Charles said. It's kind of cause and effect. Okay, it is made up to an extent, but it's kind of like, okay, this happened to me. I want to prevent this happening to me in the future, so I'm going to impose this rule to prevent this happening. And then
Yeah, that's
then,
a good way to look at it.
And
That's
then-
backward and forward looking.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. How do we fix it? How do we make it fit better? And then as society evolves, and technology for sure is driving massive changes in the law, privacy, things like that. Yeah, so how would you characterize Dworkin? Positivist or natural law? Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I'd say new natural law
New
combination,
natural law,
combination,
yeah.
not the Aquinas and stuff. I think he definitely has taken a step away from there, but
True.
yeah.
He wanted to be a natural law guy, he just didn't have the courage to go all the way.
To stick to rigid, yeah. Yeah. So, let's see, but notice how Dworkin cuts back on the sense of appropriateness. Unless it's found in legal materials, he probably would fail to make out a case. Right? What does that mean? mean, I don't think he's gonna make something up. He's gotta find it somewhere in material.
But that is a very hard standard, because if you were to subtract all of the cases of first impression and the writing associated with that over the last 50 years, and then say, decide the law in 2015 based on 1950s jurisprudence, you would have, A, you'd have chaos, and B, you would have some, well, if the justices were forced to use only that stuff from 1950, they would be going, I mean, you know, it all, I'm not going to say it couldn't be done, because they would do it, but it would be very ugly. And so the law has to evolve. I mean, you know, you said all the same. It has to evolve. So we have to wait until something is written down. But we can't write down anything without having it written down.
Or sometimes an old principle can inform a new case of first impression, you know. Yeah. Okay, good, we're doing good on time. So is Dworkin's theory of principles a theory or the absence of a theory?
I mean, I don't know how to answer that. I just think that it is a theory because he has to, I mean, there's such an interplay between principles and law that there has to be some.
Yeah.
So how are you thinking that it might not, that it might be an
The
absence?
absence of a theory.
Well,
Like what if,
Anything
what was the
goes,
argument?
like how would you know what result in any given case? Let's see, from a descriptive standpoint, he may be describing accurately what judges do, yet he claims that his notion of principles is a theory of sophisticated positivism. What do y'all think about that? Is it sophisticated positivism? Like positivism is strictly law separate from morality, right? It's just law, our rules of recognition.
This is a little bit like that, and I know I'm long-winded, and I apologize. But hey, we're taking up
You're
class
taking
time,
us into
we're getting to lunch, so it's
Yeah.
a good thing. The Ptolemaic theory of the astronomy and the universe and Earth and rotation and all this stuff, as more facts were discovered that didn't fit, the theory was modified until it was so sophisticated that it didn't have any general cohesive principle. It was all just, well, this rule in this case, and it became a very unwieldy scientific theory until Copernicus said, no, the Earth goes around the sun, you moron. And then things started, you know, it was a simpler, more elegant theory. And so the more sophisticated a theory becomes, I think what he's doing is answering objections and taking into account the fact that, well, Mercury's over there now, and how does that work? Well, because of this. And so the more sophisticated it gets, the less generally applicable it becomes.
That's true, yeah.
I will say though, the
You need
Ptolemaic,
an algorithm to figure it
Right.
out. Yeah.
the Ptolemaic system still works from the viewpoint of Earth. So
Yeah, but it's not true.
yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah,
So,
but
do
it.
y'all like Dworkin?
I thought it was accessible. It was.
Yeah, he was accessible. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as, like, if you were contrasting Hart or the natural lawyers that we talked about before, where did y'all find yourself reading that saying, yeah, I kind of like this, or were you thinking, this has some issues, or, but I view Dworkin as more of a formalist, like he keeps himself tethered to law and principles that are based in law, that they might be based in morality and politics, but they exist in law. So So he's not veering off course, you know, and wholesale coming up with stuff. Like he keeps himself tethered to the bounds of what has been done in the law and what he can do moving forward, consistent with what's in the past, even if it's tweaked. What do y'all think?
I like that. I just think it's hard to make that right answer thing. I struggle with the right answer.
I'm exactly where you are, yeah. 'Cause I struggle with the right answer too. It's hard for me to swallow that there is a right answer. I'm one of those rebels still. I won't go wholesale into natural law theory. Yeah. I don't know, that is interesting though, isn't it? Okay, did we cover our questions?
I think so.
Yeah, we did.
Did you send out questions for
No,
realism?
I didn't.
Okay.
I apologize to y'all for not having realism questions, but I hope you still read the materials because the discussion will be good and y'all will be able to follow along. And we're gonna look up stuff on Wikipedia, on this part of the realism discussion. There's
it'll-
some fun cases.
It'll just
Yeah.
go on our evaluation. Don't worry about it.
This is the first semester I've done questions, and y'all are spoiled now, you know, but it is helpful on it, and it certainly enriched our Dworkin discussion, I have to say. This was an amazing discussion today.
I thought it was.
Yeah. So, okay, well, let's break for lunch. Come back at 1 o'clock, we'll cover our realism materials. If you didn't read realism, take the time to read it, it's only like 10 pages or something.
It's pretty good.
Yeah,
it was
I love it. Like, I literally love it.
It's my favorite thing we've read so far.
Really good. Okay, good.
I came up with a lot of questions,
I
so.
like it too. Yeah. Yeah. We'll
Did you bring all your snacks, or do you need lunch? I'm walking over to Subway.
I have, yogurt pretzels today. I don't think I can eat that. I'm way too.
Well, after you've been sitting in a car and you're just exhausted,
Yeah.
you could eat, but you're just sitting there.
Yeah. No, they reinvigorated me. I was so not tired.
Well, I'm,
Oh, yeah, they're hard.
That's what jurisprudence says.
Yep.
I have to put mine in the actual.
I'm gonna mosey over to Subway. Charles, you got lunch?
I've got a lunch actually. Yep.
I'll bring mine back.
Okie dokie.
Put it on the wall.